Hello people of the internet, it is Shane here, and today I'm at Newark Air Museum, a childhood place of mine, where I aim to give you a tour of the site and give you as much information as possible on the aircraft on display. I won't be showing you all the aircraft, but we'll start with this one, the Westland Wessex, which is a military navy helicopter. As you can see, the rotors at the top there are foldable, because this aircraft was on aircraft carriers. We've got some bombs here, the Avro Vulcan, which we'll talk about in a minute. I want to say that's a de Havilland Heron, but it could be a dove. We have the English Electric Canberra, and then we have my brother. We then have this, the Gloucester Meteor, the well, Britain's first jet fighter, and it says down there, this two-seat conversion trainer was built in 1949 and upon completion was issued to 247 Squadron at RAF Oldham. I've probably butchered that. And it was acquired by the museum in 1985, and it looks a bit worse for wear, but this is the Gloucester Meteor, and this is, well, like I said, Britain's first jet fighter from World War II, post World War II. It replaced the Spitfire, I want to say, but again, because this was the first jet fighter, it was incredibly slow and basically just didn't do a whole lot, which means, yeah, it wasn't very good in fighting other aircraft, even though that was its role. We move on to the Canberra now, the English Electric Canberra, one of my favourite planes, personally, and this was kind of a descendant of this. As you can see, they look relatively similar. This is in the RAF camo, and this is the PR7 variant of the Canberra. Made its first flight in October 1953, and it joined, well, it was part of 542 Squadron.
Well, you can move freely when you want.
And it had tropical modifications, this one, so it could fly abroad, unlike some other versions. I don't actually know a lot about the Canberra. As you can see, it's all covered up and everything, but the white bit there is where you would sit. There's your information. If you want to pause that, then you can. This was acquired by Newark. It doesn't actually say, but it was set off for disposal, so this aircraft almost went to the scrap heap. So yeah, this is the Canberra. As you can see, there's actually a gun turret right there.
It is a gun turret, isn't it?
And obviously its wheels are covered up and everything. Very interesting aircraft.
Wow.
It was moved to RAF Cottesmore to become an instructional airframe and eventually to be placed as gate guardian. So that is the story of this Canberra. There are a few more at this museum. Move on to this, the, give me a minute, is the de Havilland Dove. So it's not a heron, it's a dove. And it's a 1946, I believe it's a passenger aircraft, but I could be wrong. It was delivered to the Iraq Petroleum Transport Company, so it's a Iraqi plane, even though it was built by de Havilland, who I believe, it might be, it's either British or Canadian, but I don't know. But it flew out of Tripoli, but it was sold in 1957 and converted to this form, which is the 1B, or the DH-104, whatever you want to call it. Returning to the UK in 1965, it was re-registered with Brooklands Aviation, but it was withdrawn from flying and stored until 1971, when it was loaned to Lincolnshire Aviation, which is the company that owns most of the aircraft here, as well as the Vulcan, which we will talk about right now. The Avro Vulcan is the one of the V-bombers from the Cold War, but it only saw combat once in Operation Black Book in the Falklands War, where it took part along with 5 Victor tankers which had to be refueled themselves, but the attacking Vulcan was in fact refueled 5 times throughout the entire mission, as it flew from Ascension Island all the way to the Falklands to assault, I believe, Stanley, but I could be wrong there. But anyway, this particular one I believe is XM598, which I don't think was the one to participate in the actual raid. These are the type of bombs I believe it would have carried, and there's even a picnic table underneath it if you want to have that kind of, well, if you want to do it. And for a small extra charge, if you feel like it, you can even jump into the Vulcan if you wanted to. But as you can see, it's massive. Like, this thing, you don't realise how big it is until you're actually underneath it. You've got the landing gear here, more bombs. Then we have something over here, but I don't know what it is. I think they're working on it today as well. It is a Bombay Filter, so I guess there were multiple fuel tanks on the Vulcan. Let's move on. And here's some information on the Avro Vulcan. In here is the engine hall where you have a load of engines, but I don't think we'll be going in there. But you've got a variety of engines from the Rolls-Royce Trent to a few lesser known engines. So it's quite cool in there. But there you go, engine hall, obviously in an old hangar. This caught my eye, I completely missed it, but it is a anti-aircraft gun. 120mm, so it packs a punch. There are the ammo crates that it would have come in. And also you've got some parts there. This is what it actually looks like. Pretty big is the answer, and it would also pack a punch, I guess. It was actually based at RAF Waddington. Obviously nowadays it's got some cobwebs over it, but it is what it is. Here we have a fuselage of the Avro Shackleton, which is a very rare aircraft to actually find, because there aren't many, well, if any, surviving Ashtons left. I think they were all scrapped. But yeah, this is the only part of an Ashton that has survived, which is actually mental. Let's move on. You've got all the planes again. You've got the Vulcan. It's not a plane in there. One of those tied to a chipmunk or something like that, but there is something going under restoration in there. Up next to the de Havilland Heron. It has a name, said James Young Simpson. There's the de Havilland logo. Used by British European Airways, which I guess is the livery. It flew to many of the islands and highland regional airports, one being a beach as shown on Barrett Island, which I've actually seen before on a documentary. Yeah, some of the flights actually, some of the flying, highlands I should say, flying, they tend to get, they have to run on, I can't think of the words, but basically, some regional flights in Scotland, you do have to land on beaches because they don't actually have a runway. It's a very important additional role for the Heron was an air ambulance to transport patients, as you might have just heard, to a major hospital on the mainland for urgent medical treatment. So it wasn't just a aircraft used for passengers, it was also used as an air ambulance. There's a rabbit over there, just
oh yeah, look. Two.
Anyway, that took a detour, but anyway, this is the de Havilland Heron. Like I said, it was also used for air ambulance, should say someone on Barrett Island or somewhere like that, because it is a beach runway, need medical treatment. Up next, the Blackburn Buccaneer, British Royal Navy aircraft. This particular one is XN964. Built at Bruff, I think that's how you say it, in 1963. It was delivered to the Royal Navy the same year. It was flown to the HMS Victorious to join 810 Squadron, which sailed to the Far East. It returned to the UK in 1965 to Lossiemouth, where it joined 736 Squadron. It suffered many mechanical problems, this one apparently, which means it was very unreliable, which is probably why it ended up here. The aircraft was used for experimental work at Bedford and then Pershore before being put into storage and joining the museum collection in 1988. And over that time it's actually gone through many different paint schemes. I've actually, well, I don't remember seeing this aircraft because I used to come here a lot with the grandparents during or when I was a kid. So it's weird to come back here for literally the first time in like a decade or something to see all these things that I've never seen before. This is your Blackburn Book here. It's not my favourite paint scheme, it has to be said. It's very bland. But if we have a look around, here's your hangar. So they would have, the planes that you're about to see in that hangar would have used these doors here to get in. Royal Navy, and then you have the bird, because each Buccaneer, just like the Typhoons these days, have their own identity, I believe. There's also a bird around here, so it likes Buccaneers, clearly. Let's move on to the next part. Here we have a Cub, as it's called. It was first flown in 1961, and well, this was one of the first aircraft that took people to the Channel Islands, apparently, although I may have read that wrong. Based on the markings of aircraft flying it. Oh, never mind. So the markings are just from the Channel Islands. It didn't actually do anything. Well, I didn't actually transport passengers. That's what it was. It ceased flying in 1994, and passed through various museums before arriving here in 1996. So people didn't want this. So for 2 years it just spent its life just going from museum to museum, which, to be fair, is very strange. I can't tell if that's just cracked, or if that's if like the window's cracked, or if that is just protective stuff. Anyway, there isn't a whole lot to say about this, but it used to be a blue and white paint scheme, but in 2012 it was repainted, and the winning paint scheme, if you will, was chosen by Kathy S, who, well, and that's when the museum painted it into this particular one.
It is cracked though.
The museum trustee as well. There isn't a whole lot to say about this aircraft, so let's move on. Here is the first of the American aircraft at the museum. So far we've only seen British ones, I believe, but this is the first foreign aircraft at the museum. It's a Cessna. So, all in all, it's a pretty common aircraft to see. However, it was built in 1956, and it came to Ireland firstly in 1958, and then to Surrey. It's been about a bit. It was sold on and re-registered several times until a flying accident in 1973 ended its flying career. It was not repaired, but became a instructional aircraft, or an airframe rather, which means pilots would get inside and show them the ropes. At Northbrook, it then went to Northbrook College in Shoreham, which is down south. In 2004, though, it was presented to the museum, and in 2019, it was repainted as the Blue Canoe and in American colours. So all in all, a pretty interesting aircraft, even though it's just a Cessna. Up next, the T19 version of the English Electric Canberra, which was, well, this is a training variant, so it's not actually your normal Canberra. As you can see, it's white and has training marks on it. He says, thinking they're training marks. As you can see, it has a pointed nose, unlike the other Canberra that we saw. And, yeah, there isn't really a whole lot to say about this aircraft, other than it was built in 1953. It joined 207 Squadron at Marham, so it's a very, well, let's say...
That's where the tornadoes use it.
So there. So, yeah, this is where Marham is basically the massive fighter jet place. That's what I was trying to say. It was converted to T11 standard by Bolt and Paul when the extended nose was fitted to accommodate the Javelin radar. So there is a radar in that nose instead of a gun, like on the other aircraft. It was then moved to West Raynham, or Rest Waynham as I was going to call it there. In 1963 it joined 85 Squadron. It was modified to a T19 and spent time at Binbrook, which is in Lincolnshire, before returning again to West Raynham to then join 7 Squadron. And then in 1979 it went into storage because I guess no one wanted to train with Canberras anymore. We have more aircraft over there, but we will jump on to the next aircraft, the Avro Shackleton. which is a maritime patrol aircraft, and I believe is also an anti-submarine aircraft. It was definitely from like the 1950s though, so it was it's a very old aircraft. I'm heading over to the thing there, as you can see, the information. But this is what it looks like from the thing, well, from the ground. As you can see, a lot of propellers for this particular one because it was so massive. But this is the Avro Shackleton, which, fun fact, it was only operated by Britain and South Africa. As you can see, it was built in 1957 at Woodford. It joined to 20 Squadron, which was then renamed to 201. However, it was coded L. This one is actually coded B. In 1959, it then was coded B and then D, so basically it couldn't make up its mind. Further modifications made it Phase 3 in 1968, and it was also flown into the museum, I believe. The Vulcan, Shackleton and Hastings over there were all flown in, which is pretty crazy. It was also retired to Thorney Island, which I don't know where that is, before joining a small museum at RAF Finningley, which is now Robin Hood Airport, as an instructional airframe, and it was dismantled by museum members and moved here in 1977. Oh, it was moved here. I always thought it would have been flown in, but this is an anti-submarine and maritime patrol aircraft. I should also point out that the Avro Shackleton is actually a distant cousin of the Lancaster bomber, and it's also a distant cousin of the Lincoln bomber as well. As you can, but there is obviously no relation other than it's Avro. Moving on. Up next, the Henley page, Hastings. This is a transport aircraft from, like, I believe the 1950s or the 1960s. Either way, it only saw about 5 years of service with the RAF. It was built in 1948, so I was close. But it took part in the Berlin airlift and was ended up in RAF Scampton, and then moved to RAF Kinloss, which is where the Nimrod used to be based. It was also used during the Cod War, not the Cold War, the Cod War, which is basically when the UK and Iceland had a fit over fishing rights. As you can see, 4 propellers. It's actually, I saw a YouTube video doing a tour around this place, and it looked a bit worse for wear, but I can gladly say that it looks a lot better than what it used to, because it started looking a bit sorry. There's your view down there. And now we move on to some more interesting aircraft. We move on to, I believe, a French aircraft, so the second foreign aircraft here at the museum. And I could get this pronunciation very wrong because I'm not French, but it's the Dassault Mystere, which is just a very French sounding name. From the 1950s, it is a fighter jet. It looks like the English Electric Lightning, but it's not. The Mystere 4A, this is actually, and it was designed and flew in the early 1950s. The aircraft number 83 entered service with the 8th Fighter Wing in France in 1956, and it was retired from service and flown. This was another plane that was going to be scrapped, like the Canberra earlier before. However, this was because the aircraft, along with others, had been paid for by the US government to be scrapped. Thank you, America, when its service life was over. It was taken on long-term loan by the museum in 1978. It's not American, it's French.
No, this one's American. The next one next to it's American.
Yes, this is American. This is the F-100 Super Sabre. And it is the first American fighter jet here at the museum. As you can see, there's a whole lot of things here. It's brilliant. I'd highly recommend it. Yes, the F-100D Super Sabre to be precise, built in California, and it was also based in France. It was it's been to Djibouti, as well as obviously America, because that's where it was based. It was moved to Winthrop on loan, just like the Mystere, in 1978, and it's completed about 4,400 flying hours, which for a plane from the 1950s is very, very bad. Is very, very good. I almost said very bad. Nowadays, it's
You know,
not the best, but yeah, there's your Mystere again, or Mystere, and here's your Super Sabre. Now we've got some helicopters. This is a very sad looking helicopter, and it is the Westland Lynx. And you could say, well, I believe these helicopters though are actually being restored by the museum. Westland only built 3 of these versions of Lynx, and you can probably see why. It was a special order for the Qatari police, and the order was completed in 1978. This one was given registration code QP31, so Qatari police 31. All 3 returned to the Westlands though in 1990 and were used for training. But this one arrived at the museum in 2018, so it's one of the more recent acquisitions by the museum. There is supposed to be rotor blades, believe me, there is supposed to be rotor blades, but obviously not anymore. It was powered by 2 Rolls-Royce Gem turboshaft engines, and it gave the Lynx a maximum speed of 175 miles an hour, which, to be fair, is pretty good. This is part of a Chinook exhibit under restoration, as you can see, so they're obviously getting on to this.
Are these the ones that come over our house? Well, not that one.
Yeah, the Chinook does sometimes come over, but this is being restored.
Yeah.
Hopefully in like a few months or a few years. Obviously it got delayed because of COVID, but they do want it to have obviously be a full Chinook, but it can't be. But this is the newest acquisition or purchase of the museum. The Chinook is again pretty British, to say the least. I believe this was also British, but it could be Qatari as well. So this might be a foreign aircraft. I don't know. Now, as you can see, it's in a bit of a sad state at the moment, but that's because it's not actually
from the Boeing factory.
it's not actually that. It's not restored. There's the tail of it, but that is your Chinook. You have the Westland Puma now. It is a transport and tactical assault helicopter for the Royal Air Force. There's even a gun on top of this one. But this is a British helicopter used by the Royal Air Force. See, there is it's a massive one. It's massive, to put it one way. There is your information. And it was used at RAF Cranwell for helicopter training. Up next we have another new accusation of the museum. However, I cannot tell you what it is because it's not even ready to be shown off yet. It's just kind of here. So we don't actually know what this is. So let's move on. I think we're off into the first hangar next because we've seen everything out here.